It is September of the year 1066. King of Norway Harald Godwinson reaches Yorkshire shores with his 300-strong fleet of ships in order to fight for the English throne. His target is the thriving city of York. The last great Viking invasion of the British Isles is about to begin. Northwestern Europe, the final years of the Viking Age. King of England Edward the Confessor falls into a coma and dies heirless a few weeks later. The quickest claim to the throne was made by influential Earl Harald Godwinson, who was able to convince the Wittenager Mote to choose him as the new king. Harald was crowned on the 6th of January 1066, just one day after the death of the old king. But Harald wasn't the only claimant to the English throne. Hearing of his coronation, two other serious pretendants emerged: Duke William of Normandy, later to be known as William the Conqueror, and Harald Godwinson, nicknamed Hardrada, King of Norway. Both soon started to gather forces to invade England and turn their claims more serious. In this episode, we are going to focus on the northern pretendant. Hardrada, meaning stern counsel or hard ruler, was a fearsome, almost 7-foot-tall man who gained a reputation as a mercenary hired by Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise of Kievan Rus, and later as a member and eventual commander of the elite Varangian Guard serving the Byzantine Emperor. In early September, he finished war preparations and set sail for England. He resupplied in Orkney, where some local Norsemen joined his fleet, and soon was reinforced by Tostig Godwinson, Harold's exiled brother, who sought an opportunity to reclaim the earldom of Northumbria. From Harold's point of view, Tostig's help was useful not only because he was the English king's brother, but because he could also provide invaluable information and intelligence about the invaded lands. Together, they burned and sacked Scarborough, and then headed farther south, reaching the Humber estuary on the 18th of September. Harold's first target was the city of York, so they sailed up the River Ouse, and once their scouts had reported that numerous English forces were defending the city, they landed 10 miles south of York and started to prepare for the upcoming encounter. Anglo-Saxon forces were hastily levied several days prior to the battle. The majority of them were formed by Mercians and Northumbrians, led by two brothers, Earl Morcar of Northumbria and Earl Edwin of Mercia. The English spread their troops in a line along the beck to secure their flanks. Edwin took the right flank close to the River Ouse, while Morcar commanded the left flank, spreading as far to the fordland to the east. The total number of English soldiers was roughly 5,000 men. Much of the terrain south of York was covered by marshlands, which significantly limited the maneuverability of the opposing forces. The first Norse units arrived at the battlefield and lined up to oppose the Anglo-Saxons. At this point, Harald was probably outnumbered by the English, as he left a significant portion of his troops to guard the ships, and many Norsemen were still either disembarking or still on their way to join the king's forces. Morcar and Edwin couldn't attack the Norsemen during their deployment to take advantage of their superior numbers because of the beck in front of them, which was flooded due to the tide, rendering an early attack both risky and hard to perform. When the tide finally receded around midday, the English decided to attack right away, trying to take advantage of their still bigger numbers, as Harald's army was being constantly reinforced by arriving units and would eventually outnumber the defenders. At first, Morcar with the men of Northumbria charged the north's centre and right flank, where Harald's least experienced soldiers, along with Tostig's forces, were deployed. Fierce melee fighting started on the boggy terrain along the ford, with losses on both sides. The English initially managed to push back the Norsemen, but as time passed and fresh Viking units arrived to support their foe, the battle down the ford had no clear winner. Harald waited while battle commenced on the right and in the centre, hoping his least experienced units could hold ground against a good portion of the English forces, playing for time. When the majority of his best men eventually joined him, he led the charge along the Ouse River and struck Edwin's forces. Despite his lower numbers, Hardrada was able to push the English line back into the marshes, taking advantage of having tough and experienced soldiers under him. In the centre, neither side was able to make progress in the boggy bloodbath. Morka, being unable to see the whole battlefield from his position on the slightly lower ground around the ford, probably didn't realize that Edwin's flank was being crushed by Harald's best men. Soon after, being aware that his troops were losing badly, Edwin commanded a retreat north to the city, hoping to organize a defense from there. While some of the Vikings chased the fleeing English left flank, the rest of Harald's troop now turned to attack Morka's side and rear. The Anglo-Saxons tried to regroup to oppose Harald's units, but failed, being unable to reform their line quickly enough to effectively face the new threat on the boggy ground. Soon, being outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Morka commanded his units to retreat as well. Harald Hardrada won the battle, but didn't avoid casualties. From about 6,000 of his soldiers involved directly in the battle, he lost around 900 men, either wounded or dead. Losses on the English side were probably slightly lower, but their value as a standing army then was non-existent. York surrendered to the Norsemen and was spared by Harald, possibly because Tostig didn't want his capital looted. Harald's landing was successful. Soon after capturing York, he built a camp 7 miles east of the city at Stamford Bridge and awaited the gathering of hostages from around the region. He had no idea that English King Harald Godwinson was already a few days away from York, rushing north leading an army of men 15,000 strong to repel the Viking invasion. A game-changing battle in the close vicinity of Stamford Bridge village was just about to happen.